The massive colony ship Earth's Hope hung in orbit above the alien world, its metal hull gleaming under the light of two distant suns. In the ship's observation deck, Jack Miller pressed his hand against the cold glass, studying the swirling purple clouds below. After 6 years of space travel, they had finally found a habitable planet, or at least what their scans suggested was habitable. "The stalwarts are ready to meet us," announced Captain Reed over the ship's comm system. "They've cleared a landing zone near their main settlement." Jack checked his medical kit one last time. As the ship's veterinarian, his primary job was to care for the colonists' livestock and pets during their journey. He never imagined he'd be part of the first contact team, but Captain Reed insisted on having someone with animal expertise, just in case. The landing shuttle cut through the atmosphere like a knife through butter. As they descended, Jack caught glimpses of vast forests with trees that towered higher than Earth's tallest skyscrapers. The purple clouds he'd seen from orbit turned out to be massive floating plants, their tendrils dangling toward the ground like delicate strings. The stalwarts waited for them in a clearing. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in metallic scales that shifted colors in the sunlight. Despite their intimidating height, their four-fingered hands were raised in what was clearly meant to be a peaceful greeting. "Welcome, Earth humans," the tallest stalwart spoke through a translation device. "I am first speaker. We are grateful for your response to our signal." Captain Reed stepped forward, offering Earth's traditional greeting. "We're honored to meet you. We hope this meeting will benefit both our peoples." Before anyone could say more, a deep rumble shook the ground. The stalwarts immediately formed a defensive circle, raising what looked like energy weapons. From the edge of the forest came a sound that made Jack's blood run cold, a roar that seemed to shake the very air. "Thunderer!" shouted one of the stalwarts. Everyone inside the barriers. Through the trees burst a creature that seemed impossible. It stood as tall as a 2-story building, moving on 6 powerful legs. Its head was massive, with 3 sets of eyes and a jaw that could easily swallow a car. The beast's dark blue scales rippled as it moved, and what looked like bolts of electricity crackled between the spines on its back. The stalwarts opened fire with their weapons, but the energy blasts seemed to only anger the creature. It charged toward the group, its footsteps leaving small craters in the ground. But Jack wasn't running. Instead, he was watching. Watching how the creature moved. Watching its eyes. Watching the pattern of electricity along its spine. "Stop shooting," he shouted, stepping forward despite Captain Reed's attempt to pull him back. "Look at its movements. It's not hunting. This is territorial behavior." The beast skidded to a halt about 50 feet away, letting out another ground-shaking roar. Now that it was closer, Jack could see what he'd suspected. The creature's body language wasn't that of a predator on the hunt. It reminded him more of a mother bear protecting her cubs. "First speaker," Jack called out, keeping his voice steady. "Are there any others of its kind in the area?" "Yes, a group of smaller ones was seen near here yesterday," the stalwart replied, weapon still raised. "That's it then. She's protecting her young. She sees us as a threat to her babies." Jack slowly began to move backward, making his movements deliberate and non-threatening. Everyone needs to back away slowly. No sudden movements. No more weapons fire. To everyone's amazement, as they retreated, the creature stopped advancing. It watched them with its multiple eyes, the electricity still crackling along its spine, but its roars became less frequent. "How did you know?" First speaker asked once they were safely behind the settlement's energy barriers. "We have fought these beasts for generations. They are mindless killers." Jack shook his head, still watching the creature as it patrolled the edge of the forest. "No animal is mindless. Every creature has patterns, behaviors, and reasons for what it does. On Earth, we learned long ago that understanding those patterns is better than fighting them." The stalwarts looked at each other in confusion, but Jack could see first speaker studying the beast with new eyes. First speaker said slowly, "There is much we could learn from humans about our world." The creature gave one final roar before disappearing back into the forest, leaving behind a stunned silence and the first spark of what would become a revolution in how the galaxy's species viewed its wildest inhabitants. 3 weeks after the first encounter, Jack sat in a camouflaged observation post at the edge of the great forest. He hadn't slept properly in days, but his eyes remained fixed on his tablet as he recorded every detail about the magnificent creatures he now knew lived in family groups. "You are going to get yourself killed," said first speaker, who had taken to watching Jack's strange behavior with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "No one has ever gotten this close to a thunderer and lived." Jack smiled but didn't take his eyes off the tablet. "They're not just thunderers. They're intelligent, social creatures. Look here." He pointed to a series of recordings. "They have specific sounds for different situations. This one means danger. This one is a greeting. And this," he played a gentle rumbling sound. "This is what the mothers use to call their young." A crash in the underbrush made first speaker raise his weapon, but Jack placed a gentle hand on it. "Wait. Watch." Through the trees came one of the younger creatures, about half the size of an adult. It moved awkwardly, and Jack immediately noticed it was favoring its right front leg. Behind it, a full-grown female, likely its mother, followed protectively. "This is the chance I've been waiting for," Jack whispered. He reached into his pack and pulled out what looked like a large medical kit. "You cannot be serious," first speaker hissed. "That leg is infected. See how the scales around it are discolored. If we don't help, it could die." Jack stood up slowly. "These creatures are too important to let them suffer when we can help." Before first speaker could stop him, Jack stepped out of the blind. The mother creature immediately spotted him, electricity crackling along her spine. But instead of running or attacking, Jack did something that made first speaker's metallic scales ripple in shock. He began to make sounds like the creatures. The low, rumbling call came from a small device in Jack's hand, one he'd programmed with the recorded sounds. The mother's head tilted, her multiple eyes focusing intently on him. Jack took another step forward, still making the gentle rumbling sound he'd identified as non-threatening. "The electrical activity along their spines," Jack said softly to first speaker, who stood frozen in the blind. "It's not just for defense, it's communication. Watch the patterns." True enough, the mother's electrical display had changed from the sharp, aggressive crackles to a slower, more rhythmic pulse. The injured young one stayed close to her, but also watched Jack with what could only be described as curiosity. Jack slowly set his medical kit on the ground and opened it, keeping his movements deliberate and calm. He pulled out a large injector, filled with a broad-spectrum antibiotic he'd adapted from Earth medicines. "Easy now," he whispered, though he knew they couldn't understand his words. The tone, however, seemed to help. The mother's electrical pulses remained steady. In a move that would be talked about for years to come, Jack managed to get within 10 feet of the injured young one. The mother watched every move but didn't attack. With practiced skill, Jack raised the injector and sent the medicine flying in a painless mist that covered the infected leg. The young creature startled but didn't run. Its mother made a sound, not aggressive, but questioning. Jack responded with the gentle rumbling sound again, slowly backing away. To everyone's amazement, the mother creature responded with a similar rumble. Then, with incredible grace for being so large, they disappeared back into the forest. "Impossible," first speaker said, finally lowering his weapon. "In all our history, no one has ever." "Not impossible," Jack corrected, packing up his kit with shaking hands. Now that it was over, even he could hardly believe what he'd accomplished. "We just never tried to understand them before. These creatures, I think I'll call them thunderwalkers. They're not mindless beasts. They have family structures, communication, social bonds. They're probably as intelligent as Earth's elephants or whales." First speaker stared at the spot where the creatures had been. And you think you can communicate with them, truly understand them. Jack smiled as he heard the distant rumble of thunderwalkers calling to each other. This is just the beginning. Humanity's greatest gift isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to connect with other living beings. And these thunderwalkers, they're just waiting for someone to listen. News traveled fast in the galaxy. Within months of Jack's first successful interaction with the thunderwalkers, ships from a dozen different alien species arrived in orbit around the planet. They all wanted to see the impossible. Humans working with creatures that other species had feared for generations. I don't understand why you're all so surprised, Jack said to the group of alien scientists gathered at the observation post. He had expanded it into a proper research station, with screens showing live feeds from cameras hidden throughout the Thunderwalker's territory. A tall crystalline being stepped forward, its translucent body reflecting the morning light. In our 1,000 years of space travel, we have found only one solution to dangerous wildlife: elimination or containment. Yet here you are, walking among them. As if to prove the point, a massive thunderwalker appeared on the main screen. It was Tame, as Jack had named him, the first adult male to accept regular human contact. The creature moved with purpose toward one of the feeding stations Jack had set up, where he'd discovered the thunderwalkers enjoyed certain mineral deposits mixed with native plants. "Watch this," Jack said proudly. He pressed a button on his communication device, sending out a specific pattern of electrical pulses. On the screen, Tom's spines lit up in response, and he turned his huge head toward the camera. The electrical pattern he sent back matched Jack's exactly. "Remarkable," whispered a small, furry alien scientist. "They're actually learning your signals." "No," Jack corrected. "We're learning theirs. We just had to pay attention." He pointed to another screen showing a family group of thunderwalkers. "See how the adults position themselves around the young. They're not just protective. They're teaching. Every electrical pattern, every sound, every movement has meaning." A commotion outside drew everyone's attention. Through the station's windows, they could see a ship landing in the designated area. It bore the markings of the newly formed Galactic Wildlife Preservation Council. "Right on time," Jack said, checking his tablet. "They're here to discuss expanding our program to other worlds." The council members, representing 20 different species, filed into the station's meeting room. Their leader, a tall insectoid being, spoke first. "We have reviewed your reports, Human Jack. Your success here is unprecedented. There are worlds across the galaxy where dangerous creatures threaten expansion and development. We want humans to teach us your methods." Jack shook his head. "That's not exactly how it works. We can't just give you a manual on how to tame creatures. Each species is unique. Each requires understanding, patience, and respect." "Then we want human handlers," another council member said. "We have reports of creatures 10 times more dangerous than your thunderwalkers. Surely, if you can tame these beasts." "We don't tame them," Jack interrupted firmly. "We communicate with them. We understand them. There's a difference." To demonstrate his point, Jack led the group outside. At his signal, Tom emerged from the forest. The alien scientists pressed against the station's walls, but Jack walked forward calmly. The massive thunderwalker lowered his head, electrical patterns dancing along his spines in what Jack now recognized as a greeting. "The secret isn't in controlling them," Jack explained as he placed his hand on Tom's scales. "It's in showing them respect, learning their ways, finding common ground." He turned to face the council. "If you want our help, those are the principles we'll teach. Not domination, but understanding." The council members watched in amazement as Tom gently pressed his massive head against Jack's hand, electrical patterns flowing between them in a beautiful display of trust and communication. "Very well," the council leader said. "We will establish a human-led program." What would you call it?" Jack smiled, watching as Tom turned to head back to his family. "Let's call it the Xenozoology Court. We'll train handlers, human and alien alike, in understanding and communication. But remember, our goal isn't to change these creatures, it's to change how we interact with them. As the council members discussed the details, Jack's tablet lit up with messages from Earth. More human handlers were on their way. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had known for thousands of years, that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't technology or weapons, but the ability to reach across the boundaries of species and find connection. The idea came from Bill, one of the colony's farmers, during a community meeting. The Thunderwalkers already patrol their territory and keep out threats, he said, standing up to address the crowded room. Why not work with that instinct? Let them help protect our settlements too. Immediately, the room erupted into chaos. Half the colonists shouted that it was too dangerous, while the other half argued about the possibilities. In the back, Jack sat quietly, thinking about Tom and his family group. It could work, he finally said, his voice cutting through the noise. But we'd need the right Thunderwalkers. And more importantly, we'd need everyone's trust. First speaker, who now regularly attended human meetings, stood up. The stalwarts have lived in fear of these creatures for generations. Now you want to bring them closer to our homes. Think about it, Jack explained, pulling up footage on the main screen. They're already territorial. They understand boundaries. They communicate with each other about threats. With proper training and understanding, they could be the best defenders any settlement could ask for. The colony's security chief, Rogers, crossed his arms. Our energy barriers and weapons work just fine. Tell that to the 3 families who lost their crops to raiders last week. Bill shot back. The Thunderwalkers spotted those raiders long before our sensors did. If we'd been working with them instead of just watching them. Captain Reed, who had final say in colony matters, raised her hand for silence. Jack, you've worked with these creatures for months now. Can it be done safely? Jack nodded slowly. I've identified 2 younger adults. We call them Blue and Storm, who show the right temperament. They're curious about us, but cautious. Smart, but not aggressive. With time and proper introduction. Time. Rogers interrupted. How long would this take? 3 months for initial training. Another 3 for integration. Jack looked around the room. But it has to be everyone's decision. The Thunderwalkers will sense if people are afraid or hostile. This only works with complete trust on both sides. The debate lasted for hours. In the end, they put it to a vote. The Guardian Project, as they called it, passed by a narrow margin. Work began the next day. Jack started by having Blue and Storm get used to the settlement's scents and sounds from a distance. Every day, he worked with them a little closer to the buildings. The colonists, for their part, learned to read the Thunderwalkers' basic signals. The electrical patterns are the key, Jack explained during a community training session. Blue spines mean they're calm. Quick white flashes are for alertness. Rapid red pulses mean danger. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the massive creatures became a familiar sight at the settlement's edge. Children would watch and wonder as Blue and Storm made their rounds, their electrical spines creating beautiful light shows in the evening hours. The project's true test came during the planet's brutal storm season. A group of desperate raiders, thinking the bad weather would hide their approach, tried to sneak into the colony under cover of darkness. They never made it past the outer fields. Blue spotted them first, her electrical spines flashing the danger signal. Storm responded immediately, moving to flank the intruders. The raiders, faced with 2 massive Thunderwalkers whose electrical displays lit up the rainy night like living lightning, turned and ran. Not a single shot fired, Rogers admitted the next day, watching Blue and Storm patrol with a new respect. They didn't even have to get close, just their presence was enough. Word of the Guardian Project's success spread quickly. Other colonies began requesting their own Thunderwalker pairs. Even the stalwarts, who had feared the creatures for so long, started asking Jack about training their own guardians. It's more than just security, Jack explained to a group of new handler trainees. We're building bridges between species. Every successful partnership shows the galaxy that cooperation is stronger than conflict. As he spoke, Blue and Storm passed by the window, their electrical spines glowing with calm blue patterns. A group of children waved at them, and the Thunder Walkers responded with gentle rumbles that Jack had learned meant contentment. "This," he said, smiling at the scene, "this is how we change the universe. Not with bigger weapons or stronger barriers, but with trust, understanding, and respect." 3 years after the Guardian Project's success, Jack found himself standing on a world that seemed to defy physics. Massive floating islands drifted through the purple sky, connected by bridges made of living vines. The local species, the floaters, had requested human help with a serious problem. "They're killing our sky bridges," the floater elder explained, pointing to dark shapes that moved through the distant clouds. "The drift hunters, as we call them. They eat the vines that connect our homes. Our weapons cannot stop them." Jack watched the creatures through his binoculars. They looked like a cross between Earth's manta rays and storm clouds, their bodies rippling with dark energy. "Have you tried understanding why they suddenly started attacking the bridges?" he asked. "These patterns seem new." "New?" The elder tilted her floating form. "Yes. The attacks began after we installed the new power channels in our bridges." Jack smiled. This was familiar territory now. "Show me these power channels." The investigation revealed what Jack had suspected. The new energy running through the bridges matched the frequency of the drift hunters' mating calls. The creatures weren't attacking. They were trying to communicate with what they thought were potential mates. Within a week, Jack and his team had helped the floaters adjust their power frequencies. The drift hunters, no longer confused, returned to their normal patterns. Some even began helping to maintain the bridges, using their energy fields to strengthen the vines. This scene repeated across the galaxy. On the ice world of Glacius, humans helped the native species communicate with massive creatures that tunneled through the planetary ice, discovering that they could help predict dangerous thaws. On the desert planet Kizan, a team of human handlers found a way to work with giant crystalline beings that local species had fought for centuries, learning that they were actually protecting underground water sources. "It's about looking past our first impressions," Jack explained during a lecture at the newly established Cenozoology Academy. The audience included beings from 50 different species, all eager to learn the human approach to wildlife understanding. "Every creature, no matter how dangerous it seems, has a role in its ecosystem," he continued. "Our job isn't to change that role, but to understand it and find ways to work together." The academy grew quickly. Soon, mixed teams of human and alien handlers were working together across the galaxy. Each success added to humanity's reputation as the species that could talk to monsters. One particularly challenging case involved the gas giants of the Spiral Arm, where energy beings the size of small moons had destroyed several mining operations. A team led by Jack's best student, Mike, discovered that the beings were actually protecting vast nurseries of smaller energy creatures. By adjusting mining operations to avoid these nurseries, both species could share the gas giants peacefully. Back on the Thunder Walker world, Jack reviewed reports from his graduated students. Each success story showed the same pattern. What other species saw as monsters were often just misunderstood creatures following their natural instincts. Another request for handlers. First speaker said, "Bring in Jack a message." Now serving as the liaison between the Academy and the Galactic Council, First speaker had become one of the strongest supporters of human methods. "Where from this time?" Jack asked, scratching behind the ears of a young Thunder Walker that had wandered into the Academy grounds. The creature's electrical spines pulsed with happy blue patterns. "The quantum realm. They've discovered creatures living in the space between dimensions. Everyone thought they were just energy anomalies, but after seeing our work with the drift hunters." Jack laughed. From Thunder Walkers to quantum beings, who would have thought humanity's most important contribution to galactic society would be our ability to make friends with the things everyone else feared? First speaker watched as more thunderwalkers emerged from the forest, their spines creating a beautiful light show in the gathering dusk. Young aliens from the academy watched in wonder, learning to read the patterns just as Jack had taught them. Perhaps, first speaker said, that is exactly why you humans were meant to join the galactic community. You show us new ways to see the universe. And this is just the beginning, Jack replied, watching his students practice their signals with the Thunderwalkers. There are so many more creatures out there, waiting to be understood. The warning came in the middle of the night. Jack woke to urgent messages flooding his communication panel. The stalwart guards outside his quarters were already moving, their metallic scales reflecting emergency lights. Multiple reports from the outer rim, first speaker said as Jack rushed into the Academy's command center. The Shadow Empire is capturing dangerous creatures from across the galaxy. They're trying to turn them into weapons. The main screen showed footage that made Jack's blood run cold. Drift hunters trapped in energy cages, their beautiful cloud-like forms twisted with pain. Crystal beings from Kazan forced into military formations. Even several Thunderwalkers, their electrical spines pulsing with distress signals. How many? Jack asked, his voice tight with anger. Thousands. They're using neural control devices. First speaker brought up more images. But something's wrong. The creatures are fighting the control. Many are dying. Jack studied the footage carefully. They wouldn't understand. You can't force these beings to fight. The more they try to control them, the more the creatures will resist. The Galactic Council is preparing a military response, first speaker continued. But the Shadow Empire is using the creatures as shields. Any attack would kill thousands of innocent beings. Jack straightened up. Then we don't attack. We communicate. Within hours, the Academy mobilized. Teams of handlers from every species gathered, each bringing their specialized knowledge of different creatures. Jack led the planning session, surrounded by his best students. The Shadow Empire thinks these beings are just animals they can control, he told the assembled teams. But we know better. Each species has its own intelligence, its own way of thinking. We'll use that. The plan was dangerous but simple. While the Galactic Fleet kept the Shadow Empire's ships occupied, small teams of handlers would infiltrate their bases. Instead of trying to fight, they would communicate with the captured creatures. Jack and first speaker led the team targeting the largest facility where dozens of Thunderwalkers were held. As they approached in their stealth ship, Jack could already feel the distress signals in the air. The Thunderwalkers' electrical patterns were chaotic, fighting against the neural controls. Remember, Jack told his team, we're not here to free them. We're here to help them free themselves. They slipped into the facility through maintenance tunnels. The Shadow Empire's soldiers were focused on their control rooms, never expecting an attack that wasn't an attack at all. When they reached the main holding area, Jack immediately began sending out the calm, friendly patterns he'd first learned years ago. The Thunderwalkers' spines lit up in response, recognizing the signals. Now, Jack said, let's remind them who they are. Throughout the facility, handlers began communicating with different creatures. Drift hunters received signals matching their natural frequencies. Crystal beings felt vibrations like those from their home caves. Each creature, reminded of its true nature, began fighting the control devices with renewed purpose. The Shadow Empire's soldiers panicked as their neural control networks began failing. The creatures weren't just breaking free, they were working together. Thunderwalkers used their electrical pulses to short out control systems. Drift hunters created energy fields that protected smaller creatures. Crystal beings broke through walls to create escape routes. They're not just resisting, first speaker said in awe. They're coordinating. Jack nodded proudly. They were never just beasts to be controlled. Each one is intelligent in its own way. All they needed was the chance to prove it. The liberation took less than an hour. Similar scenes played out across Shadow Empire space as handlers helped creatures break free. Without their captured weapons, the Shadow Empire's forces quickly surrendered. In the aftermath, Jack stood watching Thunderwalkers reunite with their families, their electrical patterns showing joy and relief. Around them, creatures from across the galaxy began their journeys home, each one a testament to the failure of force and the triumph of understanding. The Shadow Empire made a simple mistake, Jack told first speaker as they watched the last of the creatures depart. They thought power meant control. But true power comes from trust and respect. First speaker nodded, his scales reflecting the Thunderwalkers' celebratory light display. They'd never stood a chance, did they? No, Jack smiled. Not against the combined intelligence of all these amazing beings. Sometimes the best way to handle a crisis isn't to fight at all. It's to listen and understand. 10 years after the Shadow Empire's defeat, the Xenozoology Academy had grown beyond anything Jack had imagined. The original campus, once a simple observation post, now spread across an entire valley. Thunderwalkers roamed freely through the grounds, their electrical spines creating beautiful light shows against the evening sky. Today was special. Jack stood on the Academy's main platform, watching as ships landed from across the galaxy. Each carried creatures and handlers for the opening of the first galactic wildlife sanctuary, a preserved space spanning an entire solar system where beings from thousands of worlds could live freely. Ready for your speech? First speaker asked, his scales shimmering with age and wisdom. He had become one of the Academy's most respected teachers, showing other species how his own people had transformed from fearing Thunderwalkers to working alongside them. Jack adjusted his formal uniform, now decorated with the symbols of 100 successful missions, as ready as I'll ever be. The crowd that gathered was unlike any the galaxy had seen before. Humans stood next to stalwarts. Floaters drifted above crystalline beings, and among them all, creatures that were once feared as monsters moved freely, drift hunters floating gently overhead, quantum beings flickering in and out of dimension, and Thunderwalkers standing proud like living monuments. Tom, now old and wise, walked up beside Jack. The Thunderwalkers' electrical spines glowed with the deep blue patterns of contentment. His children and grandchildren played with young aliens in the background, their joyful rumbles mixing with laughter of a dozen species. Jack stepped up to the podium. 20 years ago, when we first landed on this world, we saw the Thunderwalkers as threats. The galaxy saw all unknown creatures as dangers to be eliminated or controlled. But humanity remembered something we learned long ago on Earth. Every living being has a purpose, an intelligence, a right to exist. He gestured to the assembled creatures. Look around you. These beings aren't weapons or obstacles or monsters. They're partners, teachers, friends. Each one has taught us something new about the universe and ourselves. A young drift hunter floated down, its cloud-like form creating gentle patterns in the air. A Thunderwalker cub played with its tendrils, electrical spines flickering with happiness. This sanctuary, Jack continued, isn't just a place for creatures to live. It's a symbol of what's possible when we choose understanding over fear, communication over control, and respect over domination. He smiled as a group of his newest students, humans and aliens alike, demonstrated their skills. They moved among the creatures, each using the specific signals and methods needed for different species. The creatures responded with their own displays of trust and cooperation. Humanity's gift to the galaxy wasn't technology or warfare, Jack said. It was the simple idea that every being, no matter how different or dangerous it seems, deserves the chance to be understood. The title Beast Tamer that some gave us was wrong. We never tamed anything. We just learned to listen. As if to emphasize his point, all the Thunderwalkers present lifted their heads and released their thunderous calls. The drift hunters resonated in harmony, while crystal beings chimed in with their bell-like tones. It was a symphony of alien sounds that somehow worked together perfectly. This is our legacy, Jack concluded, resting his hand on Tom's massive side. Not that we were the only species brave enough to tame the galaxy's wildest beasts, but that we were willing to show others that these beasts never needed taming at all. They just needed someone to understand them. The celebration lasted well into the night. Species that once feared each other now shared stories and experiences. Young handlers practiced their skills under the watchful eyes of veteran trainers. And above it all, creatures that had once been the stuff of nightmares created displays of natural beauty that left everyone in awe. As Jack watched it all from his favorite observation post, first speaker joined him. Did you ever imagine, that first day when you faced a Thunder Walker, that it would lead to this? Jack shook his head, smiling as he watched a group of children from different species riding carefully on a Thunder Walker's back, their joy transcending all barriers of species and world. No, he said, but that's the beauty of understanding. Once you start, you never know how far it will take you.